The alarm on my suit screamed before I even understood what my eyes were seeing. My name is Cale Dorn, and I was not supposed to be the one standing in that chamber when the wall came alive. We had cut through 6 meters of dead metal to get here, drilling into a structure that had been floating silent in this system for longer than my people had known how to build ships. The survey team called it a ruin. I called it a tomb. Nothing about this place felt welcoming, and yet here I was, boots planted on a floor that had not felt weight in millions of years, my breath fogging inside my helmet, my hands shaking for reasons I could not explain even to myself. Behind me, Lyra Voss kept her weapon raised, sweeping the darkness with the barrel light. She was the only reason any of us were still breathing after what happened in the outer corridor, where the floor had opened without warning and swallowed 2 of our engineers into a shaft that dropped farther than our scanners could measure. We had not gone back for them. We could not. The structure was already shifting, already waking, and every second we stayed was a second closer to becoming part of whatever this place had already claimed. "Cale, get away from that wall," Lyra said, her voice tight through the comm. I could not move. The wall in front of me was not a wall anymore. It had split open into 1,000 thin lines of light, arranging themselves into shapes, then letters, then something that looked almost like a doorway of pure energy pulsing outward in slow, deliberate waves. My instruments were screaming numbers I did not understand, radiation spikes that should have cooked us all, except they did not. The light did not burn. It watched. Behind me, Denrick Ash stumbled through the debris, dragging his scanner case, his face pale behind his visor. He was our translator, the only one among us who had spent his whole career studying the fragments of language left behind by the beings we called the Ancient Ones. Nobody in the history of my people had ever recovered more than broken symbols from their ruins. Whole civilizations had risen and fallen trying to decode even a single sentence. "It's activating," Denrick said, and his voice cracked. "Cale, it's not defense protocol. It's not a weapon. It's a recording." The floor beneath us trembled, not with danger, but as if the entire structure had exhaled after holding its breath for an eternity. Then the voice came. It filled the chamber without speakers, without any visible source, a sound that pressed directly into my skull the way thunder presses into your chest before you even hear it. Lyra dropped to one knee, gripping her rifle like it could protect her from a sound. Denrick stood frozen, tears cutting lines down his dust-covered face, because he understood the words before any translator caught up. "If you are hearing this," the voice said, "then we are already gone from here, and you are the ones who came looking." I forced myself to breathe. My scanner fed the words into my ear a half-second behind the original, my suit doing its best to keep pace with a language it had never touched before, yet somehow already understood, as if the structure itself was teaching the words directly into our machines. "We built this place as a marker," the voice continued, "not a grave. Do not mourn what you find here. We did not die in these halls. We left them, the way a child leaves a house it has outgrown." Lyra looked at me, her eyes wide behind her visor. "Cale, this doesn't match anything in the archives. The Ancient Ones were supposed to be extinct. Everyone agreed on that." "Everyone was wrong," Denrick whispered. The light shifted, and for one impossible second, an image formed in the air above us. Not a projection, not a hologram in any way we understood, but something closer to a memory being placed directly into the space around us. I saw a world, blue oceans stretching beneath white clouds, green land curling around them, a single yellow star hanging low on a horizon of hills. It was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache, a beauty I had no name for, because nothing in my own homeworld sky looked like that. "This is Terra," the voice said. "This is where we began." The name hit the chamber like a shockwave, even through my fear, even through the alarms still blaring somewhere behind my ribs. I understood the weight of what I was hearing. Terra was not a myth. Terra was not a fairy tale told by frightened elders to explain why some old ruins looked almost impossibly like they had been built by something that once looked like us, but was not us at all. "You have called us the Ancient Ones," the voice went on, and there was something almost gentle in the way it spoke, like an older sibling explaining a hard truth to someone younger. "You built stories about our disappearance. You feared that whatever destroyed us might one day come for you too. I understand that fear. It is natural to look at silence and assume the worst." The image above us shifted again, showing tall shapes moving across the blue and green world, shapes that stood upright, shapes with hands, with faces turned toward the sky the way mine was turned right now. "We did not vanish," the voice said. "We grew. We left this place, and 1,000 places like it, because staying still was never something our kind was built for. Every ruin you have found across this galaxy, every abandoned outpost, every empty station you have mourned as a graveyard, was simply a room we outgrew before moving to the next." I felt Lyra's hand grip my shoulder, steadying herself as much as steadying me. "Kale," she said quietly, "if this is true, then everything we were taught about them is wrong." "Everything everyone was taught is wrong," Denrick said, his voice hollow with disbelief. The voice continued, and I realized it was not simply recorded speech. It was structured, deliberate, built to answer questions before they were even asked, as if whoever built this message had studied 1,000 species like mine and knew exactly what fears would rise first. "You are afraid we might return and find you lacking," the voice said. "That is not why we left this message. We left it because we remember what it felt like to stand where you are standing now, staring up at ruins built by something greater, wondering if we would ever measure up. We did not come from strength, we came from struggle, from wars we nearly lost against ourselves, from a homeworld we nearly destroyed with our own hands before we learned to do better. If you have found this message, it means you have already survived long enough to reach for the stars. That alone tells us more about you than you might believe." The chamber's light began to shift once more, this time forming a long string of characters, glowing steady and patient, hovering just above the floor between us. "These are coordinates," Denrick said, staring at them like a man seeing a ghost. "Kale, these are actual coordinates." "To where?" Lyra asked, though I think some part of her already knew the answer before he said it. "To Terra," Denrick said, "or to wherever Terra's descendants can still be found." The voice spoke one final time, softer now, almost like a farewell whispered to someone standing at a door. "We do not know who you are. We do not know what your world looks like, or what songs your people sing, or what fears keep you awake at night. But we know this. If you found this message, you were brave enough to come looking, and curious enough to keep searching, even when the dark tried to convince you to turn back. That is enough. That has always been enough. Come find us, if you wish. We will be waiting, the way an old house waits for a child who finally decides to visit home." The light dimmed. The wall closed itself the way a wound closes, folding back into solid metal, as if the entire event had never happened. The chamber fell silent, except for the sound of our own breathing, ragged and uneven inside our helmets. Lyra lowered her weapon slowly, her hand still trembling. Denrick sat down right there on the cold floor, pulling off his helmet despite every safety protocol screaming against it, tears streaming freely down his face as he stared at nothing. I stood there for a long time, staring at the place where the coordinates had hung in the air only moments before, already burned into my memory. We had come into this structure believing we were exploring a graveyard, cataloging the remains of a civilization long since turned to dust. We had built careers, built entire fields of study around the assumption that the Ancient Ones were gone, that their silence meant tragedy, that whatever wiped them out might be waiting somewhere in the dark for the rest of us too. We were wrong. They were never gone. They were simply ahead of us, moving forward the way rivers move toward oceans, restless and unstoppable. leaving behind empty rooms, not because they had died in them, but because they had grown beyond needing them. Somewhere out there, past 1,000 unmapped stars, a small blue world, called Terra, was still turning under its yellow sun, its people still building, still reaching, still leaving messages behind for anyone brave enough to come looking. I looked at Lyra, then at Denric, then back at the sealed wall in front of us. "We need to report this," Lyra said quietly. "Command needs to know." "They will not believe us," Denric said. I thought about the coordinates burned into our scanners, about the blue and green world hanging in that impossible light, about a voice that had spoken to us not with threats, but with something that felt almost like hope. "They will believe the coordinates," I said. "And once they check them, nothing about how we see the galaxy will ever be the same again." We stood there in the silence of that ancient chamber, 3 small figures inside a structure built by hands that had once looked very much like ours, and for the first time since we had entered this place, the fear in my chest had turned into something else entirely. It had turned into hope, because we had not found the end of a story. We had found its beginning. And somewhere out there, past the dark and the distance, Terra was still waiting.